right. Hello and welcome. All right. Hello, everyone. And thank you for joining us for the 10th anniversary celebration of TCCA, the Technology and Curriculum Conference of Aldine. We are excited to recognize attendees from all over the world who have registered to be with us today. My name is Angel Webb, and I'll be hosting this session along with my co-host, Anna. Before I introduce the presenter, I want to go over a few items with you. Okay, the title of this session is Coding Clubs, and let's see. And so that we can prepare for our next session, I just need to make sure that you have some, during the presentation, please enter in the chat screen if you have any questions. Okay, so, and then I'll relay that onto the presenter. All right, so our presenter today, his name is Hunter. And Hunter taught middle school for 4 years and then became an instructional technology specialist and served in this capacity for 4 years. For the past 3 years, he has been the robotics coordinator for his district. Due to budget cuts this current school year, he has transitioned to a media technology specialist at a high school in Tyler, Texas. Welcome, Hunter.
Thank you so much. And welcome, everybody. Thank you for showing up today and being here. We're just going to jump right in. So today I want to share with you just kind of my experience with starting robotics clubs, as well as even kind of forming your own competition or clubs at your various campus or districts. So I have a QR code there on the bottom left and a bit.ly short link. So I'm going to give you all a minute to type that in, maybe on your web browser, cell phone, what have you. And then we will jump right on in. So I'll just give you about 30-45 seconds to get that bit.ly link in. It's bit.ly/start robotics club. And that should give you the link to my presentation so you can follow along if you like to. Throughout the presentation, that link will be provided again. So if you don't get it during this time right now, then you'll be able to hopefully get it in the near future. So let's go ahead and move in. Want to give you some suggestions today on how to start a robotics club. Give you hopefully some lesson ideas, talk about the engineering design process a little bit. I want to share with you some warm-ups or games that I've utilized or have taught my robotics coaches to use in their clubs. Talk a little bit about the engineering notebook that students are responsible for keeping up with, and then some reflection. So of course, programming and building robotics helps students kind of grow into the growth mindset. Hopefully we're all familiar with that. So there's usually a fixed mindset or a growth mindset. And so people with a growth mindset, I love this quote from Carol Dweck. They love challenges, they are intrigued by mistakes, they enjoy effort, and keep on learning. So that's basically what a growth mindset is. And that, in my opinion, is something that robotics clubs and coding, programming help students to gain is a growth mindset. So that's kind of the whole point of, in my opinion, of robotics club, of programming, things like that. So some things to think about as you start forming either a club or a competition is that you want to think about your target audience, okay? So what grade levels do you want to work with? Do you want to do all boys? Do you want to do all girls? Do you want to do a mixture? Do you want to do GT? Do you want to do non-GT, mixture of those two? And then assess what resources you have. So do you already have any kind of robotics kits or any kind of coding kits? What kind of funds, of course, do you have? Because we know that it's really hard to do robotics and coding and stuff on a budget. We'll talk about that hopefully as we progress. And then what kind of materials do you have? So things like what kind of robotics kits, of course, is your materials. We already talked about that, but also like things like pipe cleaners, popsicle sticks, index cards, construction paper, those types of materials. And what kind of spacing do you have, of course, is something else you'd want to assess is, do I have enough room to put it in? And we'll talk about that here in just a second as well. And I'm gonna pause for a second as well so that you can get that bit.ly link one more time there. It's on the bottom right. And so as you are typing that in, I want to talk a little bit more about the target audience piece. And so one of my main passions for starting a competition at my district was our local region that we are a part of did have a robotics competition, but it was only for gifted and talented students. And I started off before I was the robotics coordinator at my district. I started off helping them by doing some judging and stuff like that. And I saw the benefits that it had, and the students that I had as well. I saw like the Title I, low economic, non-GT students that I taught at middle school math. I basically saw how beneficial coding and robotics could be for them, and they couldn't participate in that competition or that event because they were not gifted and talented students. And so that really inspired me to make some changes and start working and progressing towards creating a competition locally at our own district. And luckily, I did have some help. There was a instructional technology specialist who actually started the robotics competition, I guess you could call it, at our district level the year before I took over. And so I do have to, of course, thank that person. She kind of got the ball rolling, and then I basically kind of took over after that. So let's talk about grouping. We want to think about how many students are you going to be allowed to use per robotics kit once you start getting some kits. So first of all, my experience with robotics is using the Lego We Do 2.0 and the Lego Education We Do 2.0 and the Lego Education EV3. And so my experience is mostly with the Lego kits. We did have a little bit of the NXTs for some time, and there were a few of our campuses that had another robot kit, and I'm forgetting the name of it off the top of my head. It's another big popular one. But right now, of course, with COVID, everything is a little different. So we actually right now are not, for our lower grades, we aren't sharing kits per student. So every kit is assigned to a student. Last year, we could have 2 or 3 students per kit, so they could really work together and form collaborative groups. They could talk, they could have those discussions. And so that was kind of hard this year when we were thinking about COVID, and we think about, of course, germs, and looking at the responsibility that we have as educators to keep students safe and healthy. So we had to change up our competition a little bit this year. And so instead of it being a showcase of kind of what students have been doing and with the objective of a task, we're kind of doing almost more of like a Shark Tank this year. So we do have to think about grouping. So how many students are you going to have per kit? That's definitely very important, especially with the times that we're in right now. How many teachers to student? What kind of ratio do you want to have? So if you have 4 or 5 students, is one teacher or coach going to be enough? Do you going to need more? So those, again, just things to think about. Usually, if you're just like beginning to kind of step into doing a robotics club, I would say probably 1 teacher to about 3, maybe 4 students. I probably wouldn't do more than that because if you start doing multiple groups and multiple students, it's hard for one person, especially at the beginning of the year. It's hard for them to kind of manage that. So I would do maybe 1 teacher to about every 3 or 4 students. And so like I was saying earlier, think about space. Where are you going to meet? Are you going to use maybe a library space? Is there a classroom? Where are you going to where are they going to do the work at? So something that I suggested to a lot of my coaches was that when the students are actually building their robot and they are having the pieces and they're trying to put those Lego pieces together, that they did that on the floor. And the reason why I suggest doing it on the floor is because if they're sitting up on a table, like I'm at my desk right now, if I was to be working on a robot kit and a little Lego piece, because sometimes those pieces can be really, really small. If it falls down to the ground, whether I have carpet, tile, wood, whatever, that little piece is going to bounce, it's going to roll. I may have trouble finding it. Some of our campuses have dark carpet, and some of the pieces are black. So black on dark doesn't really work very well. So again, if it falls and they're not really watching because they're busy building stuff, they may lose that piece, and then you're gonna have to spend more money finding those pieces. So I told my coaches, hey, look, get your kids to build on the floor. Okay, that way your pieces aren't falling, you're not losing them. Another suggestion that some teachers did is they went to like the dollar store and they bought some tablecloth covers, the like nylon type, real cheap tablecloth covers, either like a white or a gray or a black, basically just a solid color. And they spread that out on the floor and had their students on top of those building that. So just something else to think about there. So you definitely want to talk about norms with your students. So once you start forming a club and you you pick your students, some of my coaches, they would basically ask the students that they taught, or they would send out like an announcement to the school, and then they kind of interviewed the kids. Like, hey, can your parents pick you up after school? No? Well, if you can't do that, then you can't be in the club. And so sometimes they did that, or they had the students write like a little essay. But once you actually start meeting with your club, you need to go over some norms. So communication, how are we going to talk to each other? How are we going to communicate? The real big important thing with robotics clubs is that students feel safe failing. They are going to fail on a daily basis with robotics. They're going to build wrong, they're going to program wrong, they're going to do something, and they're going to get it wrong at some point. And so when we're talking about communication, it's really important that we communicate to the students. We show them how to communicate appropriately. You have to model what you expect, especially with the little kids, but even with the middle school and high school kiddos. They don't really know how to communicate in a positive manner. So when I'm working with somebody, or they are doing something separately and I just happen to be seeing it because we're in the room together, how can I communicate to that person and encourage them to do better? How can I basically help them feel comfortable with their failure? So what does that sound like? What does that look like? And then working together, of course. So again, if you are allowed to meet with multiple kids in a group, how do y'all work together? Is one person going to build while the other person programs? Is one person going to hand the pieces to the person that builds and then they switch? How is that going to work? Because you have to think about how many kids do you have? How many students do you have? Is there going to be a kid that's just sitting there doing nothing? So how can we work together? How can we share that load? I think that's very important. So every student gets experience doing everything. Some kids, as you go and as you kind of progress through your clubs, you're going to learn. Some kids are better at building. Some kids are better at programming. Okay, some kids have more of a leadership. And so you're going to be able to then kind of, as they work together, you're going to then kind of be able to assign them maybe jobs or things like that. So that'll kind of grow with your club. And then, of course, at the very end of your club, how are you going to clean up? So if you're building a robot and you're in the middle of building it, where are we going to put those pieces that's for our next step if we already have them out? How are we going to put the pieces away so that tomorrow when we come back, or the next day or whatever, when we come back, how are we going to know where to pick up at? As a teacher or as a coach for the robotics club, where are you going to put those robots? Do you have a really high shelf that you can put them on? Do you have a big box that you can put them in? So how is cleanup going to work? And then where are you going to store those robots as the students are building them? It's very important, especially because I had a lot of robotics coaches who were teachers. And so when they're teaching, they can't have that stuff out because, kids are going to be kids and they're going to walk by and they're going to mess with the little robots and stuff like that. So we got to think about, we got to put this somewhere safe so that people don't mess with it. And of course, also teaching the students, it's not really a norm, but just teaching them to respect each other's property. Hey, this is their robot. They spent hours building it. This is yours. You spent hours building it. Would you want them to destroy yours or take apart yours? No, so don't do that to theirs. So of course, that's really important to teach them as well. Oops, clicked out of it. There we go. And so I want to kind of move into talking about lessons and some pacing. So you want to talk about any kind of engineering concepts that you can talk about with the students, whether it's you're talking about pulleys and push and pull factors and different things like that. How different, cogs and wheels work on a machine, any kind of engineering design concepts that you can come up with for your students, and of course, try to make it age appropriate. And then design and structure concepts. How do we make sure that the robot that we build is going to be safe? So I always try to have students think about the real world. So as an example, when I think about design and structure concepts, one of the previous challenges and competitions that we had with the students was that they had to build a ride for a theme park. So let's say that they built some kind of a swing or something like that. So it doesn't maybe necessarily like a theme park, but just maybe a park that they would go to in the city. So there was this one group who built a merry-go-round. So they programmed the merry-go-round to go. Well, if you're building that merry-go-round and you're programming it, you can't have that merry-go-round going really fast because that's not safe for real life. So you have to think about, how is this going to work for real life? How fast can we make it to still keep it safe? What kind of things do we want to put to make sure that that merry-go-round is safe? And so I'm thinking about that. I'm thinking about, not only are they going to build and program that merry-go-round robot, but they may have to do some extra stuff that's not really robotics to build around the merry-go-round. Like maybe they're going to get some little foam padding to put around that to help emulate, like, okay, in real life, this is going to be a foam kind of padding area. So if the kid does fall off the merry-go-round, they're going to land on this soft ground. So they are thinking about safety concepts. So that's really design and structure of the robot, but also of the real life world around it. And then of course, force, motion, simple machines. So talk to the kids about force. So if I program the robot to go 3 rotations forward and then I put them back, well, what force is that putting on there? You could really kind of start digging into some science and some math there. Talk about motion, of course. Talk about the friction of the ground causing the robot to maybe not go as far as it did on the tile than it does on the carpet. And then, of course, simple machines. So like I was saying earlier, wheels and pulleys and levers and stuff like that your robot might be utilizing to perform a certain task. And of course, programming concepts. So once you start moving into the programming part, and some people will build first and program later. Some people will program first and build later. I don't think there's a right or wrong way to do that. So do whatever feels natural to you and for your students. But so what programming concepts? So what is a loop? What does that mean when you want students to repeat something in the programming? And now we'll talk about a game that helps with programming concepts. But think about, how can the students translate the code into like a paragraph? So if I'm looking at a string of code, and even if it's block coding, this little block says go forward, this little block says turn right, this little block says go forward for 3 rotations. How would you basically say that in like a sentence format? So the robot will go forward for 1 rotations, turn right, and then go forward for 3 rotations. So basically taking those programming and having the kids understand this is what the program means, kind of like in English. So almost learning program to English language. And then we talk about instructed versus guided free versus free building. So there's instructed building. These are 3 types of, as far as like the pacing of lessons that you can do. You have instructed building, which is telling the students what to build. I want you to build a helicopter. I want you to build a frog. I want you to build, so you're being very instructed as far as this is exactly what I want you to do. Students don't really have a choice, but it's great for the beginning of when they're building and programming a robot. Hey, let's let everybody get on the same page. We're going to build a frog, and the frogs are going to just kind of move forward, kind of almost like a jump. We're going to try to get this robot to basically jump as it's going to go. And so the whole class, the whole club is building the same thing, programming the same thing. And then you can move into guided free. So guided free building is when you give the students an objective. I want you to build an animal that makes a noise. So I'm thinking about Lego We-Do for right now. So with the Lego We-Do, students can build things like gorillas, they can build alligators, they can build frogs, snails, tadpoles, whatever. And then in the programming, not only could they build the animal, in the programming, my second guided free building task was for them to make noise. So they could have it move and whatever else they want to do, but they must make it make a noise. So they had to know how to program that to make some kind of a noise. So let's say they build a gorilla and it moves forward and then it makes some kind of a noise, some kind of monkey noise or whatever. And then of course you have free building. This is after they gain some experience. So this is going to be further along in your robotics club where you just say, I want you to build. Now that's my suggestion. I know a lot of robotics coaches who will include free building throughout as students progress. So within the first week or two of forming a club, they will do a free build. And the reasoning behind that, which is good, is students gain that hands-on knowledge already of how to build robots, what these pieces are, how they are going to come together, and they're not really limited to what they can do. They're just free builds, so they give them, all day today we're going to free build, you're just going to build whatever, and then maybe next week we'll come back and we'll program that, whatever you built, to do something. So those are just 3 different ways to kind of form a lesson, and of course pacing as you go and you progress throughout your robotics clubs. So here's the engineering design process. I can't even remember where I found this graphic. It was online somewhere. It's been such a long time ago, but I still use it because it's great. Excuse me. So you could build the you could talk to the students through the engineering design process, and you could even utilize this as a way for a lesson or your pacing to go. So the first thing that we're going to do with engineering design process is we're going to ask the students a question, or you're going to come up with the goal. So for example, I want you to build a robot. I want you to build an animal that moves and make a noise. So that's their goal. Okay. Or you could ask the students a question, what is something that you could build that would move and make a noise? So you could even open that up a little bit further. And then brainstorms. So if you ask them a question, what can move and make noise, they're going to then have multiple solutions. So maybe that's a whole class discussion or club discussion. Okay, guys, what can we build from our robotic pieces here? What do y'all think we can build that can move and make noise? Oh, a car. Yep. Okay, great. Let's write that down. A frog. Yep. All right, great. And so, you're just talking as a whole group, or you could have them do it in their little mini clubs. They could do a turn and talk. You could partner them up, do a little turn and talk. And they just need to brainstorm ideas. Step number 3 would be design. So they are going to start kind of drawing, is where I like them to do this. They're going to draw their ideas. So we're going to come up with some ideas that they could build, and then they're going to draw that out. So if it's going to be a car that's going to move and make noise, what is the car going to look like? If it's a frog, what do they think that frog is going to look like? And these designs do not have to be any type of realistic design, but you'll kind of get to see what students have in their mind as far as when they get done, what do they kind of want it to look like, which may help them as they are building it and even improving the robot. Well, hey, look, this is what your design was like. It doesn't look like that. Is there anything on your design or your building that we could improve to make it look like that? Can we add some construction paper to your robot and kind of tape it on there to make it look like that or whatever? And then you move into the 4th step, which is building. So that's when they actually start putting the Lego pieces together or whatever robot that they are using. They're going to start putting the pieces together to build whatever their objective was, whether it's a race car or a frog or a gorilla or whatever else. And then step number 5 is testing it. So obviously not all 6 of these things you would probably do in a day. There are some things that, you could go through all 6 of these in one day, but it may take you a week or 2 or a month to go through this engineering design process. So however long it takes you is fine. So testing means they've built it. Testing is really 2 things in one. They're going to program the robot to do what they want it to do, and then they're going to test that program. So they've already built it. So let's say they built that race car. Well, now they're going to program it to move forward or whatever else, and they're going to test it. Does it do what they want it to do? And then step 6 is to improve. Okay, so it moved forward, but it was kind of slow. So you want to move, it's a race car, so do you want it to move faster? What can we do on a program to adjust that? Well, what about design? This is what you drew. Does your car look like what you drew? Well, as far as when we repeat this and we build, Is there something that we're going to be able to do to build this to make it look more like what your design was? And so after basically you're done with step 6, you go and you repeat any of those pieces from the engineering design process that you want to repeat. So I want to talk to you about some warm-ups and games. These are just some general ideas. I've used some of them. I've seen different coaches use them. I just want to start with a robot and not a robot sort. And so you see the little picture there over on the right. I'm trying to move my mouse around and hopefully you can't see that. So this is just a fun kind of little game to play. You just do it on a whiteboard, have some pictures cut out or something like that. And this is for the students to determine, well, what is a robot? So for example, they've got a laptop over here right there. So that's a laptop. Well, is that a robot or is that not a robot? So the students decide, oh, we think that's not a robot. And then they have a car. Is a car a robot or not a robot? And they put that in the middle. So whatever this group, this is not from me. This is from another classroom from one of the teachers about 4 years back. Her name is Stephanie Jones. She took this picture and shared that with me. So the students determined to them what is a robot and what is not a robot. And so if we're looking back to this, it looks like most of the things that they put in a robot section, there's a little Elmo thing that moves and talks. They have a looks like a toy car that has a crane thing that you can move. Of course, a actual car. A little actually looks like a robot. A toaster over here on the right side, a television, a cat, and I forget what this one is here on the bottom right. It looks like a plant, but with feet. I don't know. So basically, what it looks like is that anything that has a moving part to it, they put as a robot. And most of the things that do not have a moving part, they put as not a robot. So to these kids that made this, things that kind of move make it more of a robot than not a robot. So that's just a fun game to play. It helps students kind of figure out what do they think is a robot, what do they think is not a robot. Get some similarities and differences there. The next one that I really, really love is Program a Friend. Some people call it the maze. Some people call it Program a Robot. And this will actually connect back to the programming concepts that we talked about here with lesson and pacing. So Program a Friend / maze, basically what that is you have one student be the remote or the programmer and one person is the robot. So the robot basically stands still and the programmer will say, move forward. Well, the robot is going to move forward forever because the programmer didn't tell them how far to move forward. The programmer didn't tell them to stop at a certain point. And so what I do is I do model this. And so with my coaches, I will have somebody that's in the audience or whatever program me, and I will literally do what they tell me to do as much as I can. Or I will program them and I'll tell them kind of what to do. And so you could kind of have instructions on the index card if you wanted to. So for example, if you are the robot, you could have a student come up and read some index cards. So for example, the first card may say go forward, and you as a robot may just go forward until you run into a wall and keep trying to go forward. And so eventually you're going to stop yourself and you explain to your students, well, why'd you do that? Well, the program just said go forward. So I'm going to, as a robot, I'm going to go forward until I cannot go forward anymore. And I'm going to keep trying to go forward though, because the programming did not tell me when to stop. The programming didn't tell me how far to go forward for. And so then you may have a good example after that. Go forward 3 steps. And so you're going to go forward 3 steps and then you're going to stop or something like that. So that's pretty much what Program a Friend is. After you do that and you model that a few times, then I would have students program a friend through like a little maze, which is why people call it a maze. So I might take some tables and chairs and kind of put them in like a little obstacle course. And I might have people, my kiddos partner up and, program a friend. So get them through the maze. You could add to this challenge, and this is always fun to watch. Have your kids that are robots be blindfolded, or have them close their eyes and like cover their eyes up, because whenever they close their eyes, the programming will change, or the robot will change. So if my eyes are open and somebody tells me to go forward 1 step, I'm going to take a pretty big step. Okay. I'm about 6'1", so and most of that is legs. So my steps are pretty big. However, if I close my eyes and somebody tells me to go forward one step, that step's going to be a little bit smaller because I cannot see, even though I know nothing is there. So like I said, it's always fun because even though they've programmed each other, that person who is now the robot, they're going to change how far they move forward or turn right or what have you. So that's just a fun game. You play it multiple times throughout the year. Human gears, it's kind of hard to explain in a video conference such as this, but basically what you do is you have the kids line up and they put their hands out like this. So hopefully you can see my hands. So they just basically put their hands out like this. And so they line up to where student number 1's hand is here. Student number 2 has a hand right behind them. So when student number 1 turns, they're going to hit student number 2's hand, and the student number 2 is going to start spinning in the direction that they were hit. And this student number 1 is going to keep spinning. Student number 2 is going to spin. It's going to hit number 3, number 4, etc. And so it kind of gives the kids a physical way of how gears work on a robot. So it's called human gears. And then there's tons of art activities. So check out Pinterest, YouTube, Google. You can just kind of look for different robotic art activities. I don't have any specific examples because there's tons out there. Brain Pop has some good videos, Simple Machines, and Brain Pop Junior has one called Computer Programming. Those are good. So any other kind of videos that you can find are always going to be beneficial as well. So let's move into the engineering notebook. I see we've got about 20 minutes left. I basically have my young engineers, they're made to, or they're kind of forced into, I guess, making engineering notebooks. It helps them hold on to those concepts and learn from their challenges and mistakes through reflection, through note taking. So each student needs to have their own notebook. So I have them put in there what kind of lessons they completed. So as the coach, if you're teaching your kids about programming, they need to be taking notes. And you, of course, could guide them through the note-taking ability. You could just kind of let them do their own, whatever. There should be lots of design sketches as part of the engineering design process. The students should be drawing what they kind of want the robot to look like. Of course, brainstorming. Hey, I want you to build an animal that moves. Okay, what kind of animals that move could they build? So they're going to jot down those brainstorming ideas. And then test results and reflections. Of course, robotic and coding is really heavy in the STEM area. So with that science piece, they're going to reflect. They're going to write down what happened, how they can make it better, if they can make it better. Of course, any kind of questions that they want to ask themselves, any kind of hypotheses or thoughts that they have, they could write in that notebook. And then these are just reflection questions that I provide for my coaches. So questions like, well, hey, what did you learn today? That could be one question that the students respond to. What was challenging with today's build, or what's challenging with today's programming? Again, the students basically answer that question in their notebook. What was the strongest or weakest thing about your design? So you could have them try to connect that back to the real world. So if this design was operating in the real world, what was the strongest thing about it? What was the weakest thing? Would it be safe? Those types of things. And of course, number 4 is the biggest one. I love it. If you had to do it again, what would you change and why? It's just, I think, one of the best reflection questions. Really gets students to kind of think critically. Okay, what we did today, you built this, you added these pieces. Would you change any of those pieces? Would you put them somewhere else? Why would you do it? Is it going to make your object move faster, move slower, things like that. So these are just, I always like to kind of reflect back to the objectives of the lesson today. So with starting Robotics Club, we talked about suggestions on what you can do to start one. We talked about making sure you have space, making sure you have funds. Of course, I didn't go into funding too much. I do have some resources about that here on the next two slides down the way. There is a Wakelet with some resources. But of course, be reaching out to any kind of foundation. I did a lot of Googling. I just started Google searching robotic funds, grants, things like that. Our district has our own grant foundation, so I could apply for grants through there. Walmart, you can actually do a quick search and do Walmart grants. They have grants. I got about $1,000 to $2,000 from various grants through Walmart, Sam's Club. I got about or 5,000 from our district grant committee. So if you have any questions or you want to see those resources, if I don't have them in this Wakelet, feel free to reach out to me. My Twitter handle is at McConnell H88, McConnellH and then 2 8s. So I can definitely help you as far as giving you some resources on finding some grants and stuff like that. We talked about lesson ideas. We talked about the engineer design process, which of course you could use in of itself as a lesson. Warm-ups and games, gave you some suggestions. Hopefully you found those helpful, and some different games that you could play with your students throughout the time that you have at Robotics Club. We talked about the engineering notebook, the importance of students to write down and reflect what they're doing. And of course, the last bullet there is reflection, which we kind of went into those example questions. So I know some of you may hopefully be posting some comments or questions in the chat, so feel free to do that. I'm going to have this slide up here. Okay, yes, can you type in here? Yes, at McConnell H88. I'm going to put it my Twitter handle in the chat, so hopefully it can be posted there. Yes, I will. I see the question just came in about reviewing warm-up games. I'll do that here in just a few seconds. Want to leave it on this slide for a minute. You've got the bit.ly link here up at the top. bit.ly/Start Robotics Club. That would give you a link to this slide presentation. And then this link here in the middle is a Wakelet of a whole bunch of different resources that I curated for robotics. So there's some links there about TCA. There's a Lego Education website. There is a website called EV3 Lessons that has tons of programming lessons for Lego Mindstorms, different things like that. And there is one link in there about grants and funding from Lego Education. So I want to make sure that y'all have that. So I'm going to jump back to the warm-up games. So I don't have any links or anything like that for art activities, Ms. Roberts, but basically what I said for art activities, there's tons of out there. I found lots on Google. I just Google searched robotics art activities. You can talk to, of course, if there's somebody on your campus that teaches art, say, hey, this is what I'd like to do. What can we do for that? Pinterest has a lot of art activities. I had my students, whenever they were drawing their design, I would have them just something simple. I'd have them go back and color that in. There are some people that will use the dash and dot. They will get it when they're programming with the dash and dot, which is another robot. There's a certain piece that you can buy where it will hold a pen or a pencil, and they can basically program it to draw different shapes and things like that. And then the human gears was basically where you get your students to stand in the line, and I'm not sure if you can see, my hands are kind of out to the left and to the right, really close to my body, okay? And so what the students would do is they would line up to this, and student A would have their hand here, student B would have their other hand right behind. And so whenever student A turns this way, they're going to hit student B, and so the student B is going to start turning that way, while student A is turning this way. And so they just basically, they don't move until their hand gets hit by that gear. And then the second student will start spinning the other way, and their hand's going to hit the next student. And so then the next student's going to spin. And so basically that just gets that kind of physical connection of the human gears. Okay, so they can kind of feel like, oh, this is how gears work. When this tooth of the gear fits into that other tooth or hits that other tooth, it's going to then move. It's just going to move something else and move something else. And so I'm going to jump back to that slide for the warm-ups. So here are all those warm-ups that I went over. Like I said, program a friend, maze, that one I think is really, really beneficial. One student is the robot, one student is the programmer. The programmer tells the robot what to do, and the robot must perform that task exactly. There are a lot of other coaches who will do, in addition to that, they will have the students write how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. They will then bring bread and peanut butter and jelly and a butter knife or a safe plastic knife or whatever, and they will read the instructions and they will do literally what it says. And so that's always a fun activity too, because students will just write the best things, like grab your bread and put peanut butter on top of it. And so that person will grab the whole bread roll and put peanut butter on top of the whole row. And so it gets students to laugh and gets them to kind of like, oh, I have to write, open up the bread, grab a bread slice, put the bread slice on the plate. Like they have to write out step by step what that is. So I'm gonna go jump back into the last slide there with those resources so that y'all can have them. And that's pretty much it. I have about roughly 10 minutes or so left. Just got notified to there. So if there are any other questions, I'll be watching the question chat. I want to make sure, of course, y'all have my link there for sharing that. About 2 slides back, I have the peanut butter and jelly sandwich is great. I love it. Thought I did somewhere in here. Nope, I took it out. I wasn't sure if I had a survey for me, but there we go. So thank y'all so much for listening, for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Again, feel free to reach out. My Twitter is in the comments section at McConnell H88, McConnell H and then 2 8s. Feel free to reach out onto Twitter, message me, tweet me, what have you. I try to be pretty active on there, at least checking it actively. It's been a while since I've posted something, but I do try to get on there. So you are welcome. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. That was great information. You learned a lot. All right. So I just wanted to be sure that everyone saw what the secret word is for this session. It's scrolling down at the bottom. The word is tenacity. Okay. And it is case sensitive. So be sure that you have that. All right. And just so you know, our next session will begin at 1 o'clock.
Thank you all very much for coming. Really appreciate you. I see the comments. I'm glad the information is very beneficial to you. So again, like I said, please reach out. You're welcome. Thank you. Definitely something I'm very passionate about. So hopefully I can help y'all in any way possible. Let me know.
All right, great. So we are concluding this session. And again, the next session does start at 1 o'clock. And while you're waiting, if you want to go and visit the vendors, please go ahead and do so. Thanks so much for attending.
Thank you.